the Pitching Masterclass. I'm delighted to say I've been joined by Kate Forbes, who is the editor of Global Digital. Kate, just explain for people who don't know exactly, what is Global Digital?
Hi there. So Global Digital is it's not DigiHub, but it does contain some of the stuff and some of the functions of DigiHub, and then a whole lot more. So Global Digital works with, it's like a content engine. It works with different correspondents and producers from different language services to make original content, which we then send out. We also generate original content from within the team. So when I say original content, that could be video, that could be text, that could be video projects, or that could be social albums. We really try and work with as many people from different parts of languages as we can to get all of your unique insight and journalism out to a wider audience. And we also get a lot of, we have strong links with English. We get a lot of pieces onto English output as well. We also have optimization as sort of a kind of part of us, which means that we look at how things are performing, look at how services are picking things up, and we try to put in place kind of new ways of working and really think about how our content is performing for audiences. So if you have questions about that, we're also really interested in that side of things.
When I was asked to do a pitching masterclass, you were the first person I thought of, because for many years I had to pitch ideas to you, and for many years you sent them back to me and said, do a proper pitch, Dan. So just tell us previously what you've done in the BBC.
So I went back through my emails last night as far as I could go, and I found some pictures of yours, and I thought, shall I include them in my presentation?
Please don't.
Okay, that would have been brilliant.
No, but I have to say, the one thing that, Dan, you always did really well was that you always identified and made you would create a really clear picture in my mind of what we would see, and almost like what the atmosphere would be of this piece. So even way back, I was looking at sort of, 7 years ago, that would always come through, the sort of this is what's good about the piece, this is how you're going to feel, this is what you're going to see. And that, even if it's not in a kind of classic pitch structure, is really, really important.
That's very, I'm stunned you've still got emails from 7 years ago. I hate to think of the size of your inbox. Claire Williams, lovely to have you as well. You're only staying with us briefly today, so I will come to you straight away now. Claire, tell us about what you're doing. Tell us what digital production hubs are for those of us who are still looking for a kind of little bit of clarity, maybe.
Yeah, so we work really closely with Global Digital in the content side of things. And I'm sure that everyone on this call has been having conversations and been to all staff calls and things, and seeing that we're kind of looking at every single service and allocating staff into content roles and output roles. There'll be movement between both sides, but the idea is that all of the digital content hubs, so there are regional content hubs, there's also the specialist hub there, which is where 100 women also sit, and we have a writers team and a formats and explainers team, and we're all thinking about that kind of multi-platform original journalism, not breaking news necessarily, but adding context to breaking news stories, thinking about explanatory content, and really focused on ideas that work for young female audiences in multiple global regions. So trying to encourage people, which everyone's very keen on actually, to work more closely with people who work in other languages on a daily, weekly basis, and to collaborate with people from Kate's team and wider content teams like disinformation and Vizjo to just really elevate the best stories that we're working on.
So let's put this in real simple terms. So somebody who's got a story idea, they're working for a language service, and they've got this great story idea, something that's got, kind of real human interest, something's tackling kind of an issue of the day as well. What should they do? What's the process for them?
Well, thank you for sharing this handy slide.
Oh, thank you for sending it to me yesterday.
There are three ways that you should think about story, really. First of all, is it a story that you need to do? It's happened today, or it is happening. Maybe it's embargoed for tomorrow, or maybe it's just a reactive story, like, I don't know, some floods or something like that. So if it's that kind of story, speak to your service editor as usual, because you will need to turn that around and get it out in a day. So that would be the route for that type of story. If, say, we were talking about floods, if they created a massive sinkhole, for example, or if the floods were going on for several days and you felt like you had a really good angle on explanatory content around that you wanted to pitch, then that would be the kind of thing that you would speak to your digital production hub editor about. They would be in touch with Kate's team, because Kate's team do a lot of search related explanatory content too. So a lot of this is about us communicating better, so we're not all working on very similar angles or the same angles on the same stories, but we're pulling people together who are interested in those stories to offer them in different ways. And then if it was something that we wanted to do, we would talk about it. We have a 10 o'clock meeting every day where all of the digital content hub editors come, some people from Output come, Kate comes, our deployments team come, our planning team come, and we all discuss what stories we're working on and think about the formats of those stories. Because in my mind, our job in the content hubs is to make sure that, number one, language service editors are getting what they need out of the content that we make, because no one wants to make content that's not going to go anywhere. And so I think of it a bit like a shop. So we want to offer text pieces, we want to offer, different length videos, we want to offer something for social on our biggest stories, so that editors can think about their own audiences and decide what works best for them. And also, for example, there was a story that came from BBC about monkey torture, and the feedback from our Africa and some of our Asia language service editors were, our audiences don't really care about monkeys being tortured. It's not one that is going to work for our audiences. But then when we talked a bit more about the story, we found it was actually British housewives who were paying for these monkeys to be tortured, and they were also embedding videos of monkey torture in YouTube videos of children's cartoons, and so children were being exposed to the videos of monkey torture. So suddenly there was an angle that people were interested in, so we made sure that we offered things around that angle. And then obviously a lot of people always want to pitch long form, or they want to pitch a podcast. I would say that even when you are pitching long form, we often think about, a text version, a social version, because that's where the audiences are that we want to reach with that content. But if you feel really strongly that it is just a documentary that you want to make, or it's a really strong investigative story that you would need a lot of help on in terms of OSINT specialism or other investigations specialism, then you should pitch that directly to the executive producer under Liz Gibbons, who looks after the region that the story is based in, and to Liz.
Can I just ask a question? If someone isn't quite sure where their story fits, what should they do? We don't want to discourage ideas. And if someone gives you an idea and it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world for them, right?
No, I mean, that is a really, really good question. And I would say, if you're not sure, if you think it lies between maybe two of these kind of routes, I would copy both of them in. And the thing that I'm really, really keen on is we're trying to give feedback to everybody about their pitches. And pitching isn't easy. I know Kate's going to give you lots of tips and tricks about what makes a good pitch, but we're here to help everyone pitch better and think about the best way that we can frame our stories, because we need your fantastic ideas. That is the heart of commissioning. We need fantastic ideas. So if we can help elevate those stories and help you develop top lines, or think about characters and ways to bring characters into stories that might at first seem to be data stories, that's kind of what I see our role as.
What advice would you give someone who's thinking about maybe a story that affects their local area, but might think, okay, how could I make this go global? What advice would you give them? What kind of angles should they be looking for?
Well, I've got a good example of that actually, Dan. So we had a Brazilian journalist, Shin, pitch us a story about sinkholes in Brazil that were linked to climate change with some amazing video. Everybody on social loves a sinkhole story. I think we can all agree with that because the visuals are always amazing. And so we've been working with him to develop that story with the data team who are helping to bring some global data angles so that it works for multiple regions. But also, as Shin's been researching the story, he's found that for quite similar reasons, there are also the same type of sinkholes forming in Nigeria and Iran. So we're automatically looking at additional regions as the story is being researched. And even though we'll probably, he's found some really strong characters as well, like a man who was kind of swallowed up by one of these sinkholes and survived. So we're going to film with that man who's never shared his story before. So that's an exclusive angle, a human angle. And then we've got data. So I hope with all of those elements, it should be a hit across language services and also for English output.
And just finally, I know you have to go. What advice would you give to someone whose pitch hasn't been accepted? You know, how do they shouldn't give up, should they?
No, and I think that it's our job to help you develop stories, and there's always an angle that's interesting in a story. So you might pitch something, but we might end up asking you to look at something else, or it might be that it's just too similar to something else that we're working on, but perhaps we can get you to collaborate with the people who are already working on a story. So I would say don't give up. We do love getting emails with ideas, and I mean, for me personally, I'm always happiest when I'm working on a story that I've pitched and you really feel like you own that story. So ideally, we would like everybody to be doing that as much as possible. So please keep the ideas winging their way into us.
Brilliant. You've also created a pitching document, haven't you?
Yes.
Which has been sent. I've sent it out on the email that's invited everyone onto this call. I'll send it out on the email afterwards as well. I know you have to go, but quickly, just encourage people to use this and tell us quickly about this.
Please, yes, because it includes really crucial things, which I know Kate's going to go into about thinking about your headline really helps you develop your story. Thinking about how you would sell that story in a summary really helps you develop a story, and help us to spend time giving you really thoughtful feedback on your idea by doing a Google, seeing what's been out there before on that story, thinking about what makes your angle different, because a lot of pitches we get, you know, when we have a look online, other outlets have covered it. We do need to develop it more. So try and spend a bit of time doing that before you send it to us. And that's it.
It's been absolutely lovely having you. I know you're a very busy woman indeed. You've got lots more meetings to go to. Thank you so much. Please don't leave everyone though, because we've got the brilliant Kate Forbes now, who's going to give you some tips and tricks on how to fill in this document. Thank you so much, Claire. Lovely seeing you.
No worries. And if anyone has any questions directly for me, I'm really sorry I can't stay for the whole call, but feel free to just drop me an email at any time.
Brilliant. I'll send out your email afterwards. Thanks so much,
Thank
Claire.
you. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Kate, you've had a few sound problems.
I did. So my laptop just gave up the ghost. I've come back in on my phone. I think the sound should be fine though. Yeah, so let's kick off.
Let's kick off. I just want to say to everyone really quickly as well, I forgot to say this at the beginning because I was so keen to get Claire in before she left. Please add your question. If you've got questions, drop them into the chat and I will either read them out or I'll even ask you to ask them out loud at the right time. If I haven't come to your question, it's just because I know that maybe we'll answer your question a little bit later on in the presentation, but I absolutely do promise you we will answer all of your questions at some point in the session. Cool, excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this pitching document as the basis for this masterclass. So the first thing in the pitching document is all about the headline. Kate, why is a headline so important to think about at the pitching stage?
Okay, so think about this. In a way, the person you're pitching to is a member of your audience, right? So you want to grab their attention. They most likely have a lot of pictures coming into them. the headline is the way you're going to grab their attention, in the same way as you would grab an audience's attention. It's thinking about headline is also really, really good because it focuses your mind, because if there's a theme that's going to run through this entire masterclass or Q&A, it will be that that all of this exercise is about making sure the idea is really, really clear and sharp in your mind, because a really clear and sharp idea will translate to a really clear and sharp piece, which is what audiences love. They love to understand and be really clear about what a story's about. So a headline essentially is about these two twin things. It's about how you're selling the story and what the story is about. And there's this classic thing that online writers are always told, which is that headline writing is about achieving twin goals. It's about telling the story and selling the story, and doing so without much space, right? So it's a bit of a battle between being accurate, but also putting kind of clickable info in. So on all of your different web pages, you know, the main headline is the one that's going to be on the front page. There's so much going on for audiences. We really want to be able to grab them, and the headline is your opportunity to do that. I just want to show down, if you've got the slide, yeah. So look, these are two headlines. It's quite UK domestic, apologies, but I think it does apply to us because of the characteristics are the same. So these are two versions of the same headline for a piece. And just put your hand up if you think option A would be the best one. And then put your hands up if you think option B. Yeah, so essentially option B is the best headline to go for. What are we doing? We're assuming a bit in this headline that people know who Cousins is and who Sarah Everard is. In a big story, this was a big running story, you know, you can take that risk that your audience will know who it is, and certainly for a commissioner, they will be across the news. The first headline is it's got a, you know, PC. Not everybody knows what that is. Old Bailey. Okay, does it really matter where it is? Yes, he's going in for the murder sentencing. It's like it's a statement of what's going to happen that day. And option B is where they have the person who is writing the piece has really thought, what is the detail or the thing that makes this story different from all of the other coverage of this court case? It's the fact that we have this new information. It's our top line, right? It's our top line, which is new information, which is that he handcuffed Sarah Everard in a false arrest before abducting her. So essentially, what I'm trying to show by this is that when you're thinking about your pitch and you're writing your headline for your pitch, just keep in the center of your mind what's going to grab the audience and what's going to make them curious. Okay, readers want to know what the story is about before they click on it. If it's vague, they won't bother. So, you know, within the headline, make sure it kind of makes sense on its own. I know we are really fond of quote headlines, and you know, they have their place, but within the quote, you need to be able to read the quote and understand what the story's about. So, you know, I don't know what you feel about quote headlines, Dan. They are a really good way of expressing an interesting thing, of letting you know about yeah, thank you, Masood. That's quite true as well. Yeah, Masood's just made a really good point that when the option B also contains a lot of the things that people will be searching for, which is the name of the man who abducted Sarah Everard, Sarah Everard's name, things like false arrest and so on. So yeah, quote headlines, fine, as long as they also convey what the piece is about. Very, very important. So headline is just a way of crystallizing your thoughts in a pitch And also it's a way of focusing the work that you do in that story towards a very clear ending, which will help you in the field, because it will mean you won't waste time doing lots of kind of extra interviews or extra bits of interviews that in the end you won't use, right? A tip, pictures that say, we want to have a discussion of, or I want to explore this issue, they will very, very rarely get through, certainly not through my desk, because it's not about an issue, it's about a story. And that's a Dan quote, actually. Dan, I think you use that quite a lot, don't you?
So when I was at BBC Africa, I had a number of people who would pitch issues to me rather than stories. So I would always say to them, okay, but actually, what is the story? I want you to tell me what you see your article or what you see your video. Well, I was working in video at the time. What do you see your video looking like? Who are the central characters here? What are they going to be saying? How are they affected by this issue? What's their story? What's the end message from this story? So having a really clear idea about what your story looked like would definitely help, and having the headline really helps you then focus on how to get that story, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're thinking about how you're selling this story. Can we go back to the slide that says headline, Dan?
Yeah, we can.
Thank you.
That one, there we go.
Yeah, you're thinking about how you're selling this story and what will make the audience click. Really, I know it sounds like obvious, like of course we're thinking about that, but one of the things that I think is interesting to note is almost all the training available for writers who write breaking news stories on the English website front page, which is obviously highly competitive as it is on your own pages, starts with stop and think. So and all that time you're thinking, what is the nub of this story? What is the top line? What's the headline of this story? That is not time wasted at all. At all. So stop, ask yourself, what's the single main point of my story? Say that main point to yourself in one sentence. Or another way that I've heard is, explain it to your mum, explain it to your best mate in one sentence. That's your sell, essentially.
Do you think it's worth clarifying? You talked about the top line. Is it worth just clarifying for people for whom maybe English isn't their first language? What do we mean when we talk about the top line in the story?
So the top line is what the point is of the story, what the story is about. So it's essentially that is if you can summarize your story in a sentence, that's your top line. This story is about a man who's trying to get to the moon in a rocket made of tin cans. It's not, this story is about a man and he lives here and he's been collecting these tin cans for 8 months, and then he's also got this family and he can't collect them all the time because he has to work because he's really poor. And then it's like, what is the absolute essence and nub of the story? So many pictures come through to me. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of it's the headline. It's essentially the headline and top line are totally linked. So many pictures come through and they're just very confused because issues are interesting, right? We're all, and as journalists, the reason why you're a journalist is because you're passionate and interested in the world. So it's natural to be interested in lots of things about an issue or a story, but you've got to choose, and quite often it will choose itself. It will become obvious what's interesting. And if it's not if it's not obvious to you, feel free to chat it through with a colleague and say, I've got this, I really want to do this story about this thing, and I've got a few case studies, and I just, and in the course of a conversation, sometimes that also will come out. It's like, what's the single best thing about this story that you've got? Okay.
Thanks.
Should we go to the next one?
It's the summary.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So this is section 2 in the pitching document. So
Yeah.
what should people be filling in that section? What are they thinking about doing?
So in the summary, so the actual sort of technical part of on a web page is, as you all know, the summary is the bit underneath the headline, right? But I think, you know, the things you should be thinking about when you're writing this is almost like the second part of the pitch, after you've established what your headline and top line is. And think about it, why should the BBC do this story? So like, what are we offering that's different from other people? Who's done it before? Have a search around. What's the BBC done before? All this thought process is around really being clear to yourself and to the commissioner, what is it that's new about what you have? Is it something that you've done before, but you've got a new line in it? Is it a different way of looking at an angle? Is it an exclusive? You know, what's new? What's new? How are you going to tell it? Is there, you know, one, as I mentioned at the top of the discussion, Dan used to send pictures in which would say, you know, these are amazing pictures, or this is an amazing thing. You know, it would really identify and become obvious, and we'll touch on it later in the section about formats. What is it that's selling this piece? Is it, you know, the fact that this person gives great quotes? Is it the fact that, you know, this piece is so visually rich? You know, how are you going to tell it? And in the summary, you're signaling how you're going to tell it. You're going to say, you know, in amazing footage, we see how the crew battled through 48 hours of stormy seas to get this, you know, scientific probe down to the bottom of the ocean. You know, you're gonna, in the summary, you're gonna sell the way you're telling the story. Okay, let's move on.
I think it's a good time to ask a question from Jiang Tran.
Yes.
Does every story from languages deserve to travel across? Are there any standards? And I guess this falls into this bit, you know, why should the BBC do this story?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you. Because I'm on my phone, I can't see the questions. What really important for us in languages is why should somebody who doesn't live in my region care about this story? And we do touch on it later down in this discussion, but one really important thing to think about is what's common between us all. So lots of different things between us, culture, religion, etc. But what's common? So just think about it. There's loads of commonalities: food, family, emotion, you know, adventure, justice, struggling for justice, struggling against the odds, holding power to account. There's lots of things which can be brought out, which will enable us to find commonalities that will make subjects interesting to audiences around the world. Not all stories that we do work for other audiences, quite often because they feel so regional and because we haven't managed to bring out that commonality, or that commonality is actually quite buried. You know, quite often it might be things about politicians or scandals in a country, you know, that don't seem to apply to other countries. Claire gave that great example of the documentary about monkey abuse. You know, we can find things, as she illustrated, you know, you can find angles which work, but in some stories that's not always going to work. It isn't. But when you're pitching, you certainly want to be thinking, what's common about this? What's like the theme here that's common amongst lots of different groups of people around the world?
I'm going to throw this one on you slightly. I didn't ask you to prepare this, but I think we should probably clarify a little bit what we mean by the angle of the story. What, you know, can you give us an example of, you know, how you might do a story from different angles?
Yeah, so actually within the next section, I've got a little example of angle in the fostering story, so I could go on to that. Would that be all right?
Okay, I can jump backwards, actually. We went to, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. So when I wanted to talk about something that's really common, and you know, in the UK, certainly in other countries around the world, it's a very well covered story, which is about fostering and adoption, or families taking other kids from other families in, because it's a perfect example of how difficult it is, or the challenge of finding new ways to tell a story like this, the story of children who need adopting, of families. You know, these small dramas, they're very interesting, they're really important. We can't just say, oh well, we covered adoption, you know, 3 years ago, we're not going to do it again. So angles is trying to find something within your story that's different, and this author does it quite well. So this piece is literally about the a process of adopting a baby. So we've done loads of things, we've done loads of personal stories on that, it's not new, but the way that they sold it was to find an angle where they found the emotion, and they focused on the weight between the beginning of fostering a baby and the end, which was 10 months later, of knowing that they were definitely going to be able to keep that baby. So they could have focused on loads of things. They could have focused on, you know, lack of support for the family from social workers, how long it takes, and isn't that a scandal that this baby's left in limbo for 10 months. The amount of families that really want to adopt, and the fact that there are not that many babies around. You know, there's so many parts of the story, but they chose to really go in on something very emotional, and to really focus on the weight rather than the process overall. Or, you know, there are many different angles in that story. So, you know, headline, and also this is quite a good example of a quote headline. Quote headlines are really overused. When I used to be setting out the front page for the UK and international news website the next day, I would have like a grid with 8 stories, and 4 of them would have quote headlines, or 5. So obviously, you know, that's how you know that too many people are filing stories with quote headlines. But this one is a really good example, because it's really intriguing. By the mum and dad and the picture, you know it's about babies, and it's obvious very soon that it's about adoption. So that's a really good example of a quote headline. Okay.
Okay, originality. This is part 3 of the form. So I guess with this, you know, we're obviously looking for original material as much as we can. But yeah, but we shouldn't be put off if someone else has done the story, as long as we can find that different angle, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody that you can all remember said there's no original ideas. I can't remember who it was, but it's just a thing. It's just a quote that has stayed with me. Which was told to me by my mum, because I used to get really stressed when I was younger, because I would feel like what I was doing for whatever exam it was wouldn't be good enough, because, you know, I think I was just, oh, so and so's done that project, I think someone else is doing this essay, and she would say, relax, there are no original ideas, right? So have a think about it. There are loads of different ways to get originality. First of all, think, how is yours different? And you know, is it a development in the story? Have you got an exclusive? Is it somebody who's close to the story who's giving us a new angle? Some people can't hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Is anyone else struggling with audio? It might be local, because I'm hearing you loud and clear, Kate. Now I've lost you.
Yeah, I just muted and unmuted. Great. Okay.
Cool. Well, I'm so sorry, those of you who are having internet issues. I think it must be your end rather than ours. Kate, sorry, where were you? You were... Okay,
no problem. So yeah, originality. Think about how yours is original. All stories have been done before. How is yours going to be different? Just take some time to think about that. How are you moving the story on? How are you not going to repeat what we've already done about it? How can you get someone who's closer to the story than we've had before, or can give a new insight? How can you prove what we're saying? What about thinking about format, the way we're telling a story? So is there a really visual way to tell a story? Could you tell it through data? And I find data projects, to be really interesting, but they are really hard to kind of conceive. So one really good rule of thumb is just to think, I want to tell a story in data. So I'm going to get point one and some data from point one, whether that's like a year ago, 5 years ago, with a group of people. And then I'm going to get some data from point B, point A and point B. And then I'm going to tell what's changed between those 2 points is how I'm going to tell my story. Look, there's a whole workshop to be done on data, but that's one of the best ways I've had it explained to me. When you're thinking about originality, sorry, Dan, go on.
No, you carry on. I was just going to prompt you a little question, but go on. You're mid-flow. I've stopped you now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to what Dan said about issues are really interesting, but what's new about the issue that you're trying to cover? And it can be kind of who's saying it, what are they saying, or how are we going to portray what they're saying? Does everybody know what it's meant by moving the story on? Dan, do you want to explain what's meant by that?
Yeah, so moving the story on is just thinking about, so this was the story that happened like a week ago. What's the situation on the ground now, or how have people responded to this issue, or how has it changed the way people are doing things, I guess. So quite often after the event, for instance, in the aftermath of the terrible explosion in Beirut, that led to a number of stories we could do afterwards. How is Beirut as a city recovering? What are local people doing to help each other and get them out of this kind of situation? Or, you could even jump back to way before the explosion and discuss the things that led up to the explosion, the things that you're not covering on particularly the day where you're talking about the damage and the, loss of life or whatever. It's about, maybe we're going to do a big deep dive into the kind of political situation that may have led to this thing happening, I guess. So that's what we mean, I think, by moving the story on. Is that a good
description? Yeah, exactly. One way that I visualize it sometimes is stories either radiate out or they radiate in. So let's take this example. Miracle drug found which cures cancer, a certain type of cancer, breast cancer. First, that's the first story angle on it. Here are some people who were in the trial whose lives were saved and their families. New angle on it. When it's going to be rolled out, argument about the cost. New angle on it. New side effects that we didn't know about. Things uncovered about how it's been rushed through. New angle. How is this going to be available for countries who are developing because it's so expensive? It's radiating out. Or a story can kind of radiate inwards. Drug is now available all over the world. New investigations show secret communiques between executives at drug company who knew it was harmful. Chasing down those executives, focusing in on them. What are they saying? What about their background? Uncovering, which is more of the investigative side. So if you're a visually minded person, think about it, either rippling out or focusing in. And think about angle, that's sometimes a nice way to think about, where else could this go? Who have we not heard from so far? What have we not, heard or said? Or another good way to think about it is just to sit there with a piece of paper and think, what do I want to know about this? What questions would I ask if I was being, and just mind map it, just draw it out for yourself. and just think, well, we know this, what's been done, what hasn't done, you know, just doodle it for yourself. That can sometimes help.
Brilliant example. Thank you very much. Shall we move on to number 4?
Any questions that I haven't seen?
There was one more about headline that Masood asked. He said, I don't, we'll do it now. He says, question, does the quote headline kill searchability? That's a good point, I think.
Well, you have the short headline and then you have the long headline, and the search is in the long headline. So normally you could do a quote headline and then underneath it. So, you know, we didn't call ourselves mum and dad for 10 months. And then under that, there might be adoption wait lists cause, you know, adoption wait list scandal continues in Britain or something like that. And then you'd get your SEO headlines in that long, you get your SEO from that.
Okay, we've moved on to number 4. Somebody's been scribbling yellow lines on my screen. One of the audience, I don't know who that is, but
oh yeah,
if you possibly
Ebru,
can.
would you like to come in, Ebru, because you're really the expert in this?
Sorry, about the SEO headline.
Yes.
Yes, so absolutely, you're spot on with what you said. They are called long and short headline in CPS, and in Optimo there's also a separate field, although it's a little bit hidden under promo. I mean, so in Optimo there are 3 headlines possible. The second headline copies over directly to the 3rd headline, which is under a different tab. So you can actually do 3 different headlines if you like, 1 for front page, 1 for on the page, 1 for SEO. But those separate fields exist, and very soon actually we're going to go to all the language services and offer new trainings on getting the best of SEO headlines and other Optimo features. So if it sounded a little bit complicated here, either drop me a line or your training is coming your way soon.
How lovely to have such experts on the line. Brilliant.
Yeah, thank
so
you.
much, Ebru. Kate, section 4, thinking about kind of both local and global audiences. Claire touched on this a moment earlier, but let's go a little bit deeper on it. What is common humanity, for instance? What do you mean by that?
So common humanity, things that are common between us, and particularly in the context of the BBC. Sometimes I think it takes you to sit there and go right back to sort of why you're a journalist, right? And why the BBC exists. So, you know, it's things like fighting for justice, speaking truth to power, holding people to account. These are really important and central, you know, quite kind of emotionally charged missions that we have as journalists. When we really get down to it, you know, what we're here for, what's our raison d'etre, our reason to be here. And if you can find those threads in a story and bring them to the top, then you can make things which might seem regional much more appealing to a global audience. Other things which you can think about are kind of, which is, you know, things that might be common interests. So things that everybody experiences or has. So things, you know, does it touch on something about the body or about health or about people's experience? You know, that would be commonly understood across different regions or different cultures. Does it touch on issues around family? You know, we all, you know, we're a species who live in families, or new things about new shapes of families, new shapes about new shapes of how we're living together. You know, those sorts of things are kind of bigger than one country. These are global trends. Artificial intelligence, it's a global trend. I don't know if you saw recently a piece on surrogacy, did really well across all of our regions. Surrogacy is like it touches on loads of these things. It's about modern life, it's about changing family structures, it's about birth, you know, which a large percentage of the globe will experience. These sorts of stories, it's not a surprise that they do that well when you think about all of the different common humanities that they plug into. I just saw a question come up. Would you like to, or a good point, would you like to make that point?
I'm going to, so this is Audac's question, I believe. Audace is saying, I've always been helped by the CLPR strategy, which is one that I talk about in one of my courses. And it's about how you, if you're trying to find an angle to do a story, if you're trying to look for the kind of human interest, you take the issue, which could be the cost of living crisis, or, you know, people struggling to pay their energy bills, and you find a character who is affected by, you find a contributor who's affected by this issue. So that's the character, that's the C. The L stands for location. So you're thinking about where you're going to be filming them. So if this is somebody who is in their home and they're struggling to pay the bills, for instance, so you'd film them around their home, you'd be showing them, you know, turning off the heating, etc., etc. The problem would be the rising energy bills, and the R at the end stands for resolution, which it means how do you bring your story to an end. So it's just about thinking about how you know, how you bring your story to a satisfactory conclusion. Do you leave with a message, or you know, I'd quite often ask people in an interview, you know, what do you want to happen next? You know, how do you see this problem being solved? For instance, that leaves your story with a resolution. So that kind of, I guess that taps into the kind of common humanity. It is, you know, people all over the world are affected by these same issues, be it global warming or, you know, cost of living crisis or whatever. So it's thinking about how finding that human angle will make the story travel further.
Yeah, exactly. And a really good question to ask yourself is, how do I want someone to feel while they're watching this or reading this? You know, and just to say right now, that's not because we put sad music on it, right? That's because it's genuinely moving or inspiring, or, you know, that it's quite a nice thing to ask yourself. I think it's like, what do I want someone to, what should someone be feeling here? A great way to check, and very important, is looking at how the subject is trending in different areas of the world, in your region and globally. The optimization team does a lot of work on this. It's also, you know, you can also do it yourself. It's about checking Google Trends. Sorry, hold on. There we go. It's about checking Google Trends. You can you could have a quick scan around to see if you know how to use CrowdTangle, to see if anything around the subject that you're doing is overperforming. But I think the best route is Google Trends. Just have a look. What are people asking about this subject that you want to you know, that you want to cover? You don't look, not everything we do has to be completely optimized to search questions. And what I mean by that is, you know, we write an article, and in that article we answer with in each case with we answer a question that we've got off search. That's a super optimized text piece, right? But you can use search questions that your audience are asking to kind of shape what you're offering, and you can look around the world to see how people are thinking about an issue like cost of living, for example, and sometimes it will throw up really interesting things that you haven't thought of before.
So for people who are kind of filling in this form at the moment, so in this section, what we're looking for is that kind of that thing that's going to make the story from your area travel worldwide, right? Just think, you know, there in most stories there is that, you know, there is a common theme that people, you know, all over the world are experiencing, or you know, there is this, you know, it's the story that has that kind of common humanity that will make people understand it no matter where they're watching. Just as an example of this, I saw a really nice video on BBC Mundo the other day. It was about global warming, and they'd found someone whose home was being kind of washed away by the sea. They, you know, spent a lot of money buying this expensive kind of flat right by the seaside, and because of global warming, the sea had risen and basically had washed away that whole estate that they lived on. And I just thought it was a really nice way of saying it. And her last line in it is along the lines of, you know, this could happen to anyone, right? And it's suddenly kind of brings it home. You know, this is a perfectly normal person living in a normal house, and suddenly, because of these things that are affecting all of us around the world, suddenly she'd lost it. And it really brings out that kind of human spirit of, oh my God, that's, first of all, that's awful for her, but also, you know, oh my God, that maybe that could happen to us next, right? You know, global warming is having an impact on people's lives that way.
Yeah, exactly. Common humanity. We all need somewhere to live. Yeah, perfect.
Good example.
So we've included a thought about how what you're doing appeals to news user needs. I'm not going to go into them in depth, partly because Ibra is on the call and I'm embarrassed to, because she's the expert, not me. But also because it's a whole other training. But I think that everybody knows what news user needs are, right?
We'll get Ibra to do a session for us one day. Sorry, Ibra, we've just volunteered you, I think.
Ibra, would you like to summarize them, or should I was just going to say they're a way. The great thing about these news user needs is that they really think about like what your piece is doing for the audience, and it's a way of categorizing your piece around that.
I think that's a good
I don't know
description.
why you think you need me, but because you've summed it up perfectly. It's a way to try and categorize our stories from the audience's point of view, because we categorize them as, oh, we've done an analysis, we've done a feature, and the audiences don't say, oh, there's a feature, let me read the feature. They say, oh, I think what I'm going to get out of this piece is perspective. I will be educated, I will be inspired. So it's based on empirical research, and it's a model. The News Needs model has started in the BBC and is now used by a lot of organizations the world over. Yeah, very happy to do a session anytime.
Great.
Ibra, we've volunteered you there. Thank you so much for doing that. Let's go on to number 5.
Yeah. So this was our favorite, one of Dan and I's favorite conversations that we always have, and people are having this conversation every day around the BBC and all news media around the world, which is like, why is this a text piece? Why is this a video? Why is this a social stack or a reel or a vertical or a long form for YouTube? Why? And you'd be surprised at how many people haven't even thought about that. So they talked about the story, great. And they're bringing this story. I've got this great interview, you know, and it's going to be really good. And I think this sportswoman is going to tell us all about this doping scandal. Okay, great. What you know, what is it then? Is it text piece? Oh, it's everything. No. Think about what it would be best as. There's a story about a group of children who built their own school. You know, are we are we there at the time? Are we going to see them building it? Are you going to get exclusive access, or has it already been built? So you're going to see the school and then they're going to stand in front of it and talk. Out of those two access points, which one's the better text piece and which one's the better video? I would say, if you're there at the time while they're building it, you've got sequences. You can describe to the person who's going to be commissioning the story, we will see them building the school. We will be there. It's amazing. It's in this very poor area and they're going to be making this thing, and, you know, brilliant sequences, brilliant video. Second, it's a visit to something that's already started. There'll be a lot of people standing still in front of something that will look the same throughout the whole video. Is that a video? Could be a text piece. You know, I think a really good rule of thumb is, are there a lot of people sitting down talking or standing up talking? Probably a text piece. Is there a lot of talking and not a lot of doing? Probably a text piece. Is there a lot of explanation to get through? Probably a text piece. Is it very visual? Do lots of things happen? It's a video. You know, videos are great, they do really well, but don't forget, videos are moving pictures. So unless you have pictures of things moving, it's not a great video. There are lots of other ways to do things visually. You could do a social album, you could do a piece with a lot of beautiful photography in it. You know, video is not our only visual medium.
I think this is really important. I get a lot of people coming on my courses who are convinced that digital first means that everything has to be video, probably social video. And it's really not. It is the exact opposite of that. It's about thinking, what is the best way to do this story? And the great part of being a video maker, I think, is knowing when it's not a video. Right? Saying, no, actually, this is not a video. We should do this as a text piece, or we should do this as, you know, a picture gallery or whatever. But that's absolutely, I think, at the absolute core of what digital first is. I think a lot of us have come from TV backgrounds initially. You know, I've worked in TV for most of the start of my career, and it's taken me quite a long time to realize that, you know, with a TV program, because you're, you know, doing a daily news bulletin, you have to do every story in video, but most of those stories, probably, you know, the court case or whatever, just do not lend themselves to video. You know, so you have lots of people standing around just talking, and that isn't video, right? There has to, if you're going to do a video, there has to be a real absolute kind of point to it. Otherwise, you know, generally text pieces do better, you know. So if you're going to do a video, do it because it has to be a video, right?
Yeah. So someone's asked a really good question, which is, what are formats? So the format is the type of story it is. So it's a video is a format, a text piece is a format, a social album, that is a format of a story. And within those larger categories, so within a text piece, formats within a text piece might be a news story, a short news story that uses a kind of top 4 paragraphs, very clear. That is a format, that is a type of story. So a format is like a type of story. Or it could be a longer feature. That's a format, a type, but that's a format within text stories. So long, like, oh, it's a mini doc, it's a documentary, that is a format. Oh, it's a short news story, that's a format. So format is like type of story. It's like, you know, the package that your story comes in. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
That was a great question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really good question. Thank you for asking that.
The
other way to think about formats is that I'll just quickly say, because we'll move on, is, look, you know, we do great scrollies, we do interesting data projects, we do amazing things with illustration, but really think about what's most important is what the story is. That should be your starting point. You know, what you're doing doesn't have to break the internet. Sometimes tradition is best. Sometimes a really short, very simple piece will get a massive audience. It doesn't have to be a kind of amazing scrolly visual journalism piece. Really start your thinking with the story and start that story with the top line. Okay. When you're communicating your pitch and your format to the commissioner, think about describing something to your really good friend. So, like, you went out and had this amazing meal. You're going to kind of talk about it, aren't you, in a way that really communicates the cool experience. Like, oh, it looked like this, it smelled like this. And you just walked in there and you to this restaurant that was, you know, looked like really shabby. And when I walked in, I just thought, what was this? But then this amazing meal came. You know, you're really taking someone there. So why not do that with your pictures? You know, this story, what we'll see is this, and it will really take you there because of this. And when we hear from this person, I think it will be a really emotionally charged interview because of this. And this person is a really compelling, when you hear them talk, it's really compelling. You know, get into it, talk to your commissioner as if you're talking to a friend, and communicate your enthusiasm for the story through your pitch.
Something else I encourage people in my course when they come on my course is to not think about digital video as a thing. because people talk about digital video generically in meetings, and that I think they mean kind of, oh, so that's YouTube, social, bbc.com, all these things at once. But actually, a real digital first future, I think, means looking at different platforms in their own way. So you might do a piece bespoke for TikTok, you might do a piece bespoke for YouTube, you might do a piece bespoke for bbc.com. So when you really think about the different audiences you have on different platforms and how they would respond to the story, that will actually totally change your treatment as well, I think.
Okay.
Cool. Last one, nearly there.
Yeah. Last one. Time constraints. Just think about it. Don't leave it out. Remember that we are a huge organisation with a need to coordinate with lots of different parts of the organisation. We need to plan. It needs to be really clear. How long is it going to take you? When can you deliver? Are you going to miss the boat? You know, things happen, issues come up. Be really honest with yourself. Is your story strong enough to take 5 days to do and then publish after the main kind of, if there's been a main splash on it or something, you know, something's in the news? Be really hard on yourself. Is your story interesting enough to bring audiences back to a subject that was in the news and now isn't? You know, just be tough with yourself about that. Is there a news peg? By which I mean, you know, is there something happening which will make your context or analysis or feature about that subject feel really like, yeah, this is important to read now, not next week, not next year, now. And then, is there anything that could slow or speed up the process? Are you waiting for somebody to get down off the top of a mountain? Have you got leave booked? You know, obvious stuff, include it.
I guess also what could speed up or slow down the process, you know, maybe if you need help from colleagues, for instance, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your team, Kate, you know, if there's things that other people can do to help you kind of move this process along, then say it and use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you know, we're here to help and we want to work with people, and we've got this brilliant team full of experienced text and video and social journalists, and they're there, you know, they're there to work with you, so don't forget that. If you don't succeed, don't be deterred. Just have a think about why. It might be that just it was, you know, that we're in a really busy news cycle and it just didn't make it. Sometimes that's just it just wasn't strong enough. You know, we're in a kind of dog eat dog world in the media. Sometimes things just aren't going to cut through. They're not going to make it. It might be that you just didn't have a strong enough top line, you know. And I want to read you this quote from Chris Mason, who's the political editor and in UK News, and is quite a very dedicated, hardworking journalist. And he says, if you don't know what your top line is, you're stuffed, basically. And my rule of thumb is, if you're struggling to find a top line, you can immediately categorize your story as mediocre, because the best stories always have an obvious top line. It's really good. And we'll send it out afterwards. I just think it's a really good reminder, because quite often when you don't succeed, it might be because your top line wasn't strong enough, or you weren't able to bring it out, you know, easily enough. And also it's quite a fun one. Take on board the feedback you get. Don't be deterred. It's absolutely normal for the best journalists in the building to get knocked back quite often. So, you know, the people who get on a lot and make front page top stories get knocked back all the time. So you're obviously going to as well.
I think taking on board the feedback is a really important thing, because hopefully from the feedback, it will help you. I mean, maybe just need to kind of repitch the idea differently, or maybe when you're doing your next pitch, it's going to give you much more focus. But if you don't take on board that feedback, you're probably going to make the same mistakes again, I would say. Kate, that is a brilliant session. Thank you so much. I hope all of you who've got ideas have been taking down notes and filling in the form as you go. If you haven't got the form, I will send it out. I'll send out an email later on this afternoon with the form on it, with some contact details for different people, and also what else will I put on it? Oh, I'll put a link to the recording of this session if you've missed some of it. So I will do all of that. A couple of questions. Judith in Nairobi is saying, sorry to take you back a bit, but I've heard of a digital documentary and I've been wondering what this is. Could you share with us what you mean by digital documentary?
Oh, so there are a few different formats, as in types of documentary that you could do that might sit on a digital platform. You know, you could do something that's, so on YouTube, anything that's characterized above 8 minutes is characterized as long form. So it could be 8 minutes and over for long form. It could be something like Africa Eye that I think sit at either 21 or 27 minutes long, around that. You know, and they sit on digital platforms as well as being broadcast on television. So it can be a couple of different things. Some people even try and sell their stories as mini docs. So they try and sort of cram in a really quite well researched in story into a cut down, which is around, you know, 4 or 5 minutes long. But certainly for social media platforms such as YouTube, which tends to be where 16:9, so horizontal classic TV type documentaries get put on social media, on social platforms, it's 8 minutes and over.
I think you need a really good story idea to pitch a digital documentary.
You
to get
do,
people to watch for 28, 29 minutes, you have to have something that's going to really keep people watching for 28 or 29 minutes.
Yeah.
If you've got an idea and you want to kind of talk it through with someone, I'll be happy to have a chat with you, or talk to Kate or Claire, whoever. One more question. All the messages of thanks are. Masood asks, do you take bids from freelancers?
I saw your question flash up actually, and I've got to be honest, I'm not sure, because I haven't actually worked at the World Service for that long. So I'd need to check on what the policy is at the moment. I think the answer is probably yeah, but I'm not sure. I think certainly investigations under Liz Gibbons, they certainly do. I know that for sure. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying. 83 people still left on the call after around 20 minutes of us
That's
talking.
great.
Not showing
Our
any
engagement
videos.
rate's very high then. Thank you,
You
everyone.
have
And for
managed
your
to
questions
sustain
have
our
been
interest.
really brilliant.
We hope this has clarified some of your questions about pitching. As a content maker, I think getting your pitch sorted is a really, really good thing to do, because it focuses your mind when you actually get down to making the content as well. You'll be thinking about the angle, you'll be thinking about, who it is you're actually going to be interviewing and what they're going to be doing and what format of content it's going to be. So get your pitch sorted. It sounds like a nuisance. Oh, do I have to fill in this form? But actually, one, it helps you get your story to go far and wide, and there's no better feeling than seeing your story going across all the World Service languages. It's a wonderful feeling. And secondly, as I said, it really does just help you when you actually get down to that production process.